All right, let's get started. Welcome to Ever After Academy's first Marriage 101 panel. If you're not familiar with Ever After Academy, it is your first stop as you begin planning your wedding and preparing for marriage. We offer workshops and panels to give you the confidence to start asking educated questions and getting the information that you need to make the best decisions for you. We have some amazing panelists here to help you begin your marriage planning journey. Joining me tonight is home organizer Florence Deniau,
Hello?
financial advisor Peter Stein, matrimonial attorney Danielle Montalto-Bly, and sex therapist Dr. Steven Snyder. These are the professionals that I refer as a premarital counselor. And since most of you are engaged couples or maybe early in your relationships, you may not even know the questions to ask. As I've said before, we will be tackling some taboo topics tonight: sex and money, balance and fairness, and figuring out what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours. My name is Hope Mirlis. I am the founder of Ever After Academy. I will be moderating the panel tonight and getting things started from the premarital counseling perspective. So please utilize the chat box, ask questions in the Q&A section, and while each of the panelists speak, if there's a relevant question, I'll ask it. But if it makes more sense to wait until the Q&A portion of the evening, I will do that. If there's no other questions before we start, let's get going. So I became a wedding officiant in 2010, and then quickly started looking at this idea of premarital counseling to be a better advocate for my couples. And then as I developed my premarital counseling program, I wanted to make sure to cover topics that couples should really talk about before marriage. I call these the big issues. I like to start with communication. I want to make sure that couples really have open and honest communication with each other, because then they can't talk about anything else. So usually I share two tools with my couples when we talk about communication. And for some strange reason, when I talk about communication, I use an example around either home organization or tidying the home. And it usually resonates with most couples.
Mm.
So I found that if couples were having an issue around home organization, whether that is moving into a space together that maybe is from one of the pair and not both, that there is this feeling of mine versus ours, or basically how each of the couples, each of the pair interacts in the space that may not work for both couples. So that's when I usually refer couples to a home organizer.
Mhm.
So I'm so excited to have Florence Deniau here. So I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you. So I'm Florence Deniau from my own company. It's called Maison by Florence, which you probably see with the accent that I'm French. I've been doing home organizing for many years now, and I specialized since probably 2023 to couple that get married and also moving, from one country to the other. And what I've noticed about moving in when we are in love, we think everything is great the first month, and then suddenly chaos starts. Because if you're young, if you married young or even older, you have a lot of things at home by yourself. I don't know in America, but there is a study in Europe that says each person has 10,000 items. So I believe in America, you have much more than that. And if you add a person to it, it's already, let's say 20,000 K, 20, it's a lot of things that you have to put in common. And sometimes you move to a smaller place at the beginning because you move to your fiance or fiance or married. I mean, so it's a smaller place most of the time. Not everybody is lucky enough to have a bigger place when we move in. So my first advice in this case is, of course, to take an home organizer, and especially Maison by Florence, but really to get help from outside or to have few tips, which I will give you to make things more fun. Because after all, you married for love and you have to share a space and you want your things, the other person wants his or her things, and you have to mix all this with different tastes. And that's a lot of work. So before you get married and before you move in, I will advise to make it a fun game, meaning, you have an evening at your place, and you go with your, fiance to be, to your husband or wife to be, and you tell them, what you don't like in my house, and let's do as a game, with a bottle of wine, with some good food, and hopefully some sex. That should help to make the choice. But I think you have to make it fun because after all, you only think about it's only about things. That's nothing to do with anything else. But too much things could be a big problem in a marriage, especially for space. So I will tell you to do like dates, like let's do a date at my place this week and another date at your place next week, and let's pick things that we don't want. So this way you could start to, have a better idea of, what your man or woman want to keep, because, I mean, a man usually they like, like a big chair to watch their TV, and we hate that, right, as a woman. And a man would see, oh, many, so many clothes that you don't need. So let's make it for fun at the beginning, and to start to declutter and to choose what we're gonna keep. So that will be my first advice. Make it fun, because it has to be a fun ride. That's the first thing. And always start, I will say, I've noticed that with my client, because to go through rooms, it's sometimes very emotional. So I will start with the kitchen. Go to your fiance's kitchen, because you're going to get the same thing. You're going to have the same pots, or you're going to have the mugs. You don't need 50 mugs, for instance, or, how many pots or things for for your salads to dry your salad do you need? You know what I mean? I mean, you need one, and maybe two when you have a second house, but by then you will have another one. So start with the kitchen. It's always a good way because it doesn't have you don't have that much emotion in terms of letting it go with the kitchen. Same thing with the bathroom, especially for the ladies, because we know how much we like creams. But, maybe it's time to declutter a little bit in this.
That is
And then,
so smart to think about the emotions.
yes, because
Which
everything,
rooms would have more emotion than other
voila.
rooms?
I mean, I'm not going to be like, Marie Kondo made an empire out of this. So I'm not going to copy and say what she says, but it's true that, if you have something that doesn't really make you feel, why do you keep it? Do you really need it? You're going to have a new life with the person you love, and you're going to share your life and your space. So you want to make it fun, and you want to make it comfortable for both of them. You have to be comfortable in your space, and the other one has to be. So that goes if the two people are tidy. But sometimes it arrives that, one is super tidy and the other one is not. So in this case, you should do the same thing, meaning, declutter as much as you can. And if your space allows you to have a private space in that apartment, give it to the guy or the woman that is not tidy, saying, this is your space. Be messy if you'd like, but I respect your mess. And kind of like, make an effort on, what we have in common. Because that could get to your brain. I saw couples not getting divorced. I wouldn't say to this. Maybe they are now, but I don't know. But to get really unhappy about, being married with someone who doesn't know, because that person probably won't change because it is what it is. But at least if that person had their own space, they could more understand your tidiness, understand you and respect you because they have their space. So
Wonderful.
that will be, that will be my first advice. I know it's a very overwhelming time, but you have to, enjoy the ride.
Indeed.
I really like that you talk about have fun with it. Because if you say, look, this is going to be fun. We're going to make this fun.
Yes, because, I mean, otherwise, it's not going to be a great
Yeah.
great time for nobody because if you
We're each
start
going to lose some stuff, but we're going to have fun.
exactly, and it's funny sometimes you let go of things, talking about it with your fiance, and you realize that yeah, no, you're right, honey. Why did I keep that things for so long? It's ugly. It's for you also to show to the other one that this thing, is not great because most of my clients are a woman. They have their husband coming to their space. So it's, that's where, you have to really, um, their space is usually smaller.
Yeah.
My clients who have husband that they move to their husband's place is usually bigger. So it's, you have to have it. But it's always, we always we always make it work at the end because one has to give a little bit more. But
Mm.
that's okay because, it's about love. So it always works out. But you got to be ready and you got to, think about these things before you move in.
Indeed.
Because,
Florence, merci beaucoup.
pas de rien, avec plaisir.
Uh, With couples in premarital counseling, I do discuss finances, usually around their beliefs and their behaviors, but sometimes there's a correlation between how money was discussed or handled with their families. However, when couples need specific financial advice, that's a little out of my realm. So that's when usually I would refer them to a financial advisor. So I'm so excited to have Peter Stein here to speak from that perspective.
Thank you very much, Hope. I appreciate it. Excited to be here tonight. I work with a lot of folks who are about to get married or recently got married and are kind of early on in the matrimonial pathway. Partly because I just got married myself last September. I work with a lot of folks who are kind of in a similar stage of life to me, so people tend to introduce you to people that are like themselves. So it's a space that I certainly work in a lot. And, the way I describe my work as succinctly as possible is goal-based financial planning. And I always very heavily emphasize that goal-based component because that really is the place to start. Whether I'm working with an individual or a married couple, what ultimately makes the most sense to do with your money and your savings is going to be dictated by your goals and your plans for the future. Definitely, the next few years, next 2, 3, 4, 5 years are going to be the most concrete, but the medium and the long term is super relevant as well. And so that's kind of my number one piece of advice when I'm working with about to be married or newly married couples is um, talking about your goals together and understanding like what are our priorities when it comes to the money that we're saving? What do we want to be putting it towards? Probably the number one Short-term liquidity need that I hear about with the couples that I'm working with is purchasing real estate or purchasing a home or an apartment somewhere. Usually that requires a good amount of cash on hand for a down payment, closing fees, other, one-time costs, things like that. So, what it might mean is for a period of time, you're not saving for the long term or towards retirement, at least not a ton, while you focus on gathering that liquidity for these, shorter term goals or needs. Maybe there's kids in the picture and you're saving for college education or maybe higher education for yourself. And not to mention the longer term goals, right? Everybody's got different thoughts around their retirement, how they wind down their careers, or if they want to wind down their careers. So that is really where the conversation always starts. And when you're working as a couple and as a unit and you're merging your finances, you want to make sure that there's alignment there, as that's, ultimately going to dictate the best things to do with your savings. And then the other piece that's important, and I think a source of conflict a lot of time, is the savings itself, like understanding how much money is coming through the door per month and how much money is going out the door in expenses per month. Because obviously that's what dictates how much you're able to save. And there's no right or wrong answer here, but I think what's important is that couples are saving, a similar percentage of their income. Because I think when a lot of conflicts arise is when one is not saving at all and the other is saving quite a bit. So kind of having alignment on not just the goals, but what percentage of our income are we willing to allocate towards those goals? And once you kind of have that information, that's where really the rubber hits the road. We're able to, meet together, create a plan that will help you achieve those goals. For any money that does make sense to invest for the medium or longer term, we can talk about how are the best ways to invest that, making sure you're leveraging all the tax efficient vehicles and accounts that are out there. But really, it all starts with what are the objectives, what are the priorities, and how are we going to save to meet those priorities? So that is where I always start the conversation. And then, from there, it obviously gets very bespoke.
Awesome. Peter, a question just came into the chat. It was asked, I make a lot more money than my fiance. How can we merge our money fairly?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and everybody handles this differently. And I'd say most of the married couples I work with, they do merge their finances. I work with couples who keep their finances separate. But in the situation where, one spouse is earning a lot more than the other, again, I think what's important is that they're allocating a similar percentage of their savings towards the goal, right? The volume and the exact dollar amount of what each person is saving each month, each year might be very different, but the alignment of we're both going to put 5%, 10% of our income towards this goal. That way it's kind of an equal, distribution. And maybe you decide together it doesn't make sense for it to be equal, and that's fine too. But again, it's really the alignment and the discussion, and making sure you're on the same page that I think is most important.
Awesome. That was super, super helpful. Danielle, it seems like this is probably an easy transition to you and your work, but we're now starting to get more into taboo topics. Discussing prenups can be a little frightening because many couples don't want to think about protection if there's divorce. So I'm going to pass things over to you.
Thank you so much. So yes, I'm Danielle Montalto-Bly. I am a divorce and family law attorney here in New York, and I definitely can see the overlaps in what we're already talking about, the issues with organization, the issues with an imbalance in finances. These are the things that tend to create the cracks in the pavement when it comes to matrimonial issues. But nevertheless, I am a tremendous advocate for prenuptial agreements. And I think that it's such a taboo area that people are very uncomfortable with broaching the subject at all. But the reality is that a marriage is more than just a romantic union. It's a legal contract. And when you get married, you are essentially opting into state laws. And a lot of the time I see that people, for better or for worse, don't really know those laws as far out as filing for divorce. And at that point, it's too late to make any changes because most of the time the relationship is contentious and not everybody's going to be on their best behavior. So what I like to kind of put out there is that you have an option and an opportunity with a prenuptial agreement, first and foremost, even if you don't want one, to use it as the jumping off point for very difficult conversations and ones that people tend to avoid. And even aside from that, it's also a bit of an insurance policy. For someone like me who sees litigation all of the time and sees people out of character all of the time, it's a worthwhile investment to sit down with your partner and have conversations about how you want to operate your finances as a essentially business entity, right? Because you have signed a legal contract. And we can do a lot of things with prenups, right? So most of the people that come to me, they are looking to protect what they're coming into the marriage with. And there's a little bit of a misnomer that prenups are meant for the ultra wealthy or people who have assets to protect when they get married. And the reality is most of the younger couples are relatively similarly situated these days, and they don't have much and they don't think they have anything to protect. But realistically, what we're looking to do is to opt out of those default law provisions and to make our own rules that pertain specifically to that couple. And that is with respect to the finances that are earned while together. Most people don't know that in New York, the presumption is that anything, whether it's an asset or a debt acquired during the marriage, is considered marital. And it's presumed to be marital unless you can prove otherwise. Title is not controlling. It does not matter whose name is on the account. It's still up for grabs. When I tell people that, some people are fine with it. And I say, you don't necessarily need a prenup, but I'm glad you had the conversation. And for those that are horrified by it, I say, this is exactly why we have prenups, right? Because as much as you love the person, you need to respect the contract, because protecting your future is a form of love as well. And being responsible with that burden of making sure that your joint finances are aligned with both parties' vision of the future is such an important part of marriage. So we look at it as a roadmap that the parties can design together and that protects both of them no matter what happens.
That's so great. The question just came in for you of what's a postnup?
That's a great question, Hope. So a postnup is a very similar concept to a prenuptial agreement, except the parties are negotiating it and signing it after the date of marriage. So sometimes that's because people wait a little bit too long, too close to the date of marriage. Normally, we want a prenup signed at least 30 days in advance of that marriage date. And I don't advise that you're negotiating those terms a week before your wedding. So we might, transition it to a postnup as long as everybody's still on board. Or it could be for couples who experience a hardship or open a business or have some type of change that prompts them to take a look at the joint finances and put some provisions in place so that, again, we're not first visiting those terms when the parties are potentially already in a bad place.
Awesome. Super helpful. So
Excellent.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. When I work with couples in premarital counseling, when I end the beliefs and values conversation, I ask couples about what excites them about being home together. It is an easy transition into the feelings and behaviors around emotional intimacy, because if we're not connected with our partners, we really want to be physical with them. With that in mind, I would love to welcome Dr. Steven Snyder here to talk about intimacy and sex.
Okay, great. Well, I'm thrilled. Thank you, Hope, for having me, and especially happy for once in my career to be following a matrimonial lawyer, because the matrimonial law stuff is the most difficult conversation. So for once, I'm in the second most difficult conversation. There's a difference between, consulting a sex therapist and consulting a financial planner. in that the one is goals based, and with any luck, the sex therapist is not goals based. Um, the two pieces of advice that people get usually when they get married are wrong. The first piece of advice is be very generous with each other, give each other a good experience, take care of each other. The other piece of advice is make sure your partner has a climax. And both of those are really cause a lot of mischief, um, because a really good rule is that passion is selfish. You want to make sure that you yourself are feeling nourished, uh, and it's taking you someplace special when the two of you get together physically. And if you're doing that, then you're probably going to be fine. When both people can really take care of making sure that they have what they need in order to feel satisfied by the experience. Um, the and as far as climaxes, unfortunately, most couples really focus on that and they neglect other stuff. You probably know this. Couples tired, they're both going to bed and they want to make sure everybody has a climax. That's okay once in a while. But as a sex therapist, we think of that as, going out to eat and just having dessert. It doesn't necessarily make you feel nourished in the long run. You can do it once in a while, but you want to make sure pretty much at least once a week as a rule of thumb that you're having the full meal, that you're having the appetizers, and then you're having the entree, whatever that is. And I'm going to keep this PG. Then at that some point, the dessert cart rolls around and you say, "Oh, we get to have dessert too. I love this place." So that's really what you want. So the question comes up: how do you make sure that you're really getting nourished during lovemaking with your spouse? And it's just something I think about a lot. I actually wrote a book about it called Love Worth Making. And the reason I wrote the book is I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere that talked really about the emotions of this. And as far as I can tell from decades of talking to people, the key thing about good lovemaking is being genuinely aroused, which usually means, to one extent or another, losing IQ points. You want to really be in a state where you're kind of feeling dumb and happy. And the test of this is if the phone rings, you don't really care who's calling. You just want them to go away. You're really into your partner, but you don't really want to hear about their day. You just want them to make nice noises and tell you you're wonderful, because the sexual impulse is very infantile. It's not a lot of thinking involved. So how do you do that? Well, one thing, Hope, you and I talked about before when we spoke, is to make sure that you're not only getting excited together when you're going to have sex. A lot of couples fall into that trap. It's binary. We're going to have sex, so let's get excited. Or we're not going to have sex, and not get excited. It's a major mistake, but most couples unfortunately make that mistake. The better thing is to make sure that there are lots of times during the week that you get excited for a minute or two, maybe, even when you're not going to have sex. It's a little frustrating. It's okay, but it's good frustration. It's a little bit like being a teenager in high school between class. You make it a little excited, boyfriend or girlfriend, and then the bell rings and you dart off in opposite directions feeling fabulous. There's no reason that unmarried people should have all that good feeling. And then when you do you do have sex, you want to really feel like you're really nourished, that you're not just giving your partner something, but you're taking something. I always say it's a misnomer to be giving somebody oral sex. I think it's a terrible idea. Instead, you should be taking oral sex from the other person. If they want to have a climax that way, that's fine. But that's really on them. It works out much better. In a romance novel, you never read about the hero taking off ripping off the heroine's clothes and then saying, "Now tell me how you like to be touched." It's just not passionate. Unfortunately, a lot of people read a lot of advice books, like 7 Ways to Drive Him Crazy in Bed, and they're trying to do all these things. And I have an unending series of people in my office who say, "Yeah, it's just really kind of boring because there's really no passion in it." So you just want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're really getting something out of it. Because otherwise, years down the road, that can cause mischief. If you're just kind of giving and giving and giving, you don't really feel there's anything for you in it. Or to put it in financial terms, you want to, when you're having sex or simmering or getting excited for any reason, you're making a little bit of a deposit in your sexual bank account together. And that's an important thing to do, both in simmering, just getting excited for its own sake, or having sex. And you want to make sure that you're simmering and you're not just cuddling. A lot of couples, I talk to them and they're just cuddling all the time. And I say, cut that out, just stop that, because it kind of neuters you a little bit sexually. Instead, if you're doing something together that's kind of relaxed, you want to make sure you're losing a few IQ points together while you're doing that. And that's really the best way of making sure that things can go on in a rewarding way for a long, long time.
Awesome. That was so helpful. Thank you so much, everyone. And actually, everybody attending, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I will be following up with a survey as well as contact information for all of the panelists, especially if you would like to reach out and talk to them further. Next up at Ever After Academy on Sunday, August 17th, we have our quarterly Zen Bride workshop in person here in New York City in the Financial District. It's a workshop for brides where we process the vast array of emotions that you're probably experiencing, tackling the stress with relaxation techniques, and sharing our struggles and celebrating our successes. And then our next panel is a Wedding 101 on September 16th with a wedding planner, a photographer, a venue consultant, and a caterer. For more information, check out the website everafter-academy.com. Thank you again to our amazing panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, Hope.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy to have all of you here. I'm sad that Danielle had to jump off, but here for all of you attending, here is to preparing for your happily ever after. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.